We've all wished at some point that we could go back in time and fill a barn full of Subaru 22Bs or BMW E30 M3s or even Ferrari 250 GTOs when they were cheap. Equally, it would be nice to be able to pop into the future and see what was going to go up in value. Sadly, I'm not Doc Brown or Marty McFly, and this DeLorean won't time travel. But the Hagerty Bull Market might just be the next best thing. If this film energises your flux capacitor, then do please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get an award-winning magazine, 24/7 flatbed roadside assistance and myriad other benefits. To find out more, just click on the link below. Now I should say that the Hagerty Bull Market has never been about making money. It's not trying to be a shortcut to great wealth like Biff's Sports Almanac in Back to the Future 2. Instead, it's about Hagerty using all of the tools at its disposal to analyse the market and recognise what's currently looking like great value. Buy your dream drive now while it's still within reach, and then enjoy it. This year we've got 11 cars, and I'm going to pick one from each decade to drive, starting with the 1960s. The Series 1 3.8 litre Jaguar E-Type coupe really needs no introduction. But I've done it anyway. It's still great value for a true blue chip classic, and the average value of Condition 2 car has dropped 17% since its peak in 2022. Likewise, the Volvo 1800 has also seen values down by 16% since 2023, but they're now starting to climb back up. It's appropriate that we've got these two cars together for a couple of reasons really. For a start, they both came out in 1961. And although obviously the Malcolm Sayer design is absolutely iconic, in some ways I actually think that looks more modern. The other thing to say is that everybody knows that was in the Saint, the vehicle of Roger Moore, but originally the producers wanted to put him into a Jaguar. What might have been, eh? Now, which one to drive? Because we've got Lime Rock Park at our disposal, we don't need roads. I promise I'll stop with the Back to the Future quotes now. But it seemed a shame not to venture out and film at least a little bit of the famous New England countryside in the fall. Cue a slow-mo leaf shot. De rigueur, almost the law. There was actually an advert when these were new that sort of still rings true today, works for the Hagerty Bull Market, because Volvo put out this ad, a single page, and it said, what's it like to drive a $10,000 car? And it had pictures of Maseratis and Mercedes and things like that up above. And then it said, find out for $3,995, and had a picture of the 1800 down below. And that's still the case, because you'd have to pay an awful lot more, obviously, to get the Jaguar compared to this today. The first thing you notice when you get in here are these dials. They're just stunning to look at, with all the sort of layers, the numbers on the layer nearest to you, and it goes all the way back. They're by Smiths, made in England. And it's just a really cool car to be in this. And the nice thing is that, although it's very definitely a classic, it feels very easy to drive. So the steering is, well, pretty direct actually. The ride is good, as you'd expect of something of this sort of era and with decent sidewalls on it. Yeah, it's quite undemanding. There's nothing difficult about this, and actually there's quite a bit of room in here, certainly more room than I'd have in the Jaguar. The quirky positioning of the rear view mirror also helps with a sense of space. The M40 4-speed gearbox, although not as tight and precise as the Jaguar's, is also nice to use. The only thing you don't have, obviously, compared to the Jaguar is, well, that straight 6 engine. We've got a straight 4 in this, the B18 engine, B standing for benzene or petrol, and 18 referring to 1800cc. Actually, later ones of these got a B20 engine, which is obviously a 2 litre. These are running on SU carbs, twin SU carbs, and it's got about 100 brake horsepower. It's okay. It's certainly got enough for the brakes. This is an 1800S, and that S denotes the fact that it was when the production moved to Sweden. Now you might think, well, it's a Volvo, surely it was always made in Sweden. But no, the first cars were actually made by Jensen in the UK. This was actually a Swedish designed car as well, somebody called Pelle Pettersson, who later became better known for designing yachts and being an Olympic sailor in the Star class. But for some reason, Volvo tried to claim that this wasn't Swedish design, that this was Italian designed. And yes, he was sort of working vaguely under the umbrella of gear, but yeah, why not lean into the fact that it's a Swedish car and it's Swedish designed? Right, time to head back to the track and back to a car that was definitely designed in Italy. The next car in the Hagerty Bull Market list is the Ferrari 400 or 412, and this is quite unlike any other Ferrari I've driven. Apart from else, it's not particularly quick, but it is actually a very important Ferrari, and it's also one I've rather enjoyed driving. It's important for a start because it's the first Ferrari that was ever offered with an automatic gearbox. This Borg-Warner 3-speed auto. Oh. Now, it's not a great thing, not gonna lie. Its shifts are pretty clunky and it seems to sap a bit of the joy out of the engine, which we'll come back to in a bit. But nonetheless, it's important, and it was also very popular as well, because from when it was introduced in the 400, it accounted for 2/3 of all the sales of 400s and 412s. Amazing, really. The engine it's connected to, well, that's important too, because this is the last time that we would see the Colombo V12 in a Ferrari. It's extraordinary to think it started all the way back right at the start of the company with the 125S. It was just 1.5 litres at that point, whereas in this is a 400, it was 4.8 litres, and then it went up to 4.9 litres for the 412. And like that original, the original 125, that referred to the swept volume of a single cylinder. So in the 400, that's 400 cc's in a single cylinder, 412, etc., etc.
The early 400s had 335 brake horsepower, but then the Weber carbs were replaced with Bosch K-Jetronic fuel injection, another first, and power on the 400i, like this, dropped slightly to 315 bhp. I imagine it might feel a little nippier with the 5-speed manual, but that will cost 50% more. And overall, this is clearly a car for making stately rather than sporty progress.
It's a car that you can imagine Enzo Ferrari at this sort of age in life, so he would have been in his 80s when this car was produced. This is a car that I think would have appealed to him at that point. It is a very comfortable car, but actually, for all the fact that it's not particularly quick, it is nonetheless still very good to drive. The steering is lovely, there's real feel to it, and the chassis, for all that it's not sort of particularly sharp, it's really nicely balanced and actually drives through the corners very, very well. I like this way more than I thought I would do to start with. I got in it and just thought, oh no, too slow, it's not a very Ferrari really. But the more I've driven it, the more it's kind of got under my skin.
It might not be the Daytona or 250 you always dreamed of, but this is a much more affordable way into a Ferrari, with the average value around $55,000. However, with searches on the Hagerty valuation tool having gone up by around 70%, these prices are unlikely to last forever. Alternatively, if you're just keen on the idea of a 70s rear-wheel drive 2+2 in general, then why not take a look at the Datsun 280ZX? Values of these have already started going up, and sell-through rates at auctions are increasing.
This is the more powerful, later turbocharged version of the 280ZX, and as we're at Lime Rock Park, we had to bring it here to the Paul Newman Straight. Newman lived near here, and his racing career really started here because he was doing track days on a Tuesday evening when he got the bug. He also did his final laps here just before he died in 2008. And of course, one of his most famous race cars was a 280ZX. Just a little bit faster than this one.
Now onwards into the 1980s, and from an inline-six to a pair of V6s. The Ford Bronco II was launched in 1984 and was only ever available as a 3-door. It had a clone V6 under the hood with up to 140 horsepower, and there were both rear-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive variants. Not that it's a car you even want to think about driving quickly, particularly in the corners. Just ask Ford's lawyers. Anyway, Gen Z and millennials seem to love the vibe of the bucking Bronco, and prices are on the rise as a result. But perhaps unsurprisingly, it is Gen X that is most interested in the reader's wildcard choice.
This is the first time that I've driven a DeLorean, and, well, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. To be honest, I've always been a little bit sniffy about them in the past. All the things I'd heard, obviously all the stuff around John DeLorean is fascinating, but doesn't necessarily cast the car in a great light. Obviously, I'm a fan of Back to the Future, so that's in its favour. But as a driver's car, not really sure. It's obviously heavy because it's got the stainless steel body. The chassis, however, by Lotus, steel backbone with those sort of Y bits at the end. The engine definitely down on power, around about 150 brake horsepower, kind of if you're lucky, from this French V6 all the way out the back, rear-engined, not mid-engined. And to be honest, no, it is not a quick car, but just to drive this is such an experience. I had really underestimated how cool it would be to be in this car. Just walking up to it from dead head on, you see how wide it is and how low it is, and to sit in it, it feels exactly the same. You can see how reclined I am in this seat. So driving it is just wonderful. It's a bit of theatre, really, and then you obviously open the gull-wing doors. It's wonderful. No wonder values are going up as well. Imagine parking this next to your stainless steel Cybertruck.
Back to the Future will probably remain the biggest driver for DeLorean prices though, and film memorabilia has been selling for big money recently, with Nike Mag shoes tripling in value in the last 5 years. You'll need tens of thousands if you want to heel and toe in a box fresh pair.
One little thing that should be said about the DeLorean is that it will do more than 85 miles an hour. It has a speedo on here that only goes up to 85, and famously you needed to get to 88 miles an hour in the film in order to time travel. But this was something that at the time the American government was putting speedos in all cars that only went up to 85 just to convince people that they shouldn't go above that in order to save fuel, basically. So yes, it will go faster than 85 miles an hour, even if the speedo says otherwise.
Right, time to hop into the next decade.
Welcome to the 1990s and two cars that stand on the shoulders of previous generations. We'll come back to the Mercedes in a bit, but I want to talk about this 5th generation Honda Prelude, which, well, this one is absolutely immaculate in its electron blue pearl. The Honda in the 90s, it just is peak Honda in a way for me, because it makes me think of Ayrton Senna instantly. And whilst I'd never really been around a 5th generation Prelude before, as soon as I got into this, it brought everything flooding back. It might be front engine, front wheel drive, but instantly when I drove it and put it into first gear, it made me think of the NSX.
It'll cost you considerably less than an NSX though, with prices of good ones sitting around $12,000, and a relatively narrow gap between the top and bottom of the market, presumably thanks to good Honda build quality. Talking of which,
the G-Wagon just has such a feeling of solidity. It was one of those cars I didn't really get till I drove one, to be honest. And then you realise that they're just the most tactile sort of vehicle. Not necessarily from the driving perspective, but everything else. From the moment you push the button deep into the door to open it, and then all the sounds that they make just give you this feeling of utter solidity and quality. And, well, listen to this. That's just the locks going up and down in the doors, but there's something brilliant about it. It sounds like it will last for centuries. Oh my word. I always love the fact you have the 3 buttons up here for the diff locks, the 3 diff locks up there. Differential locks. Warning, never use differential locks on paved roads! Exclamation mark. Engage differential locks limit the ability to move around curves. Well, I'm moving around a curve, so clearly they're not locked. Now, the model that Hagerty has picked specifically for the bull market this year is the G500. It's the W463. Now, that was the generation that came out in sort of 1990, and it was a real change from the military background of the G-Wagon, the Geländewagen, that then put it into the more luxury market. The G500 is really interesting as well, specifically for the American market, because Mercedes wasn't going to bring the G-Wagon to the US, but a small company in New Mexico called Europa International thought, do you know what, we'll do it. So they jumped through all the hoops in order to be able to bring this into the US and sell it, distribute it across the US. And particularly when the G500 came along, they became a small manufacturer basically, so they had the distribution rights for this, and they really popularized the G500 as a high-end car. They targeted the more wealthy audience. These things would be delivered to homes directly on covered transport, so it had an air of luxury about it, and that's often really how we think about the G-Wagon now. That's where Mercedes-Benz has gone with it. It's seen as a very luxury vehicle, but that wasn't necessarily down to Mercedes-Benz. It was down to Europa International, which I think is fascinating. In the early 2000s, Mercedes-Benz then bought out Europa International and started doing it themselves. But yeah, wouldn't have happened without a small company in New Mexico.
Ironically, exports are actually now growing, with values higher overseas. Although it has a 300 horsepower 5-litre V8, a G500 is fairly obviously not a track car. But perched up high on your ladder chassis, you do feel like even in standard form it would last the course of a Dakar or Baja, or even the average school run.
It's an imperious position, this. You definitely look down on people. And apexes. Look, one's over there. Missed it. Now obviously we've put this into the 90s category because it is a 90s car, that's when it came out. But really, who knows when this was produced? I mean, all G-Wagons, they look the same, really. I know you know, I know, but most people wouldn't know whether this G-Wagon came out yesterday or 30 years ago. It's sort of brilliant, really.
And on the subject of design, that leads us with a flourish into our final group.
Seeing this trio of noughties cars together, something becomes quite obvious, ignoring the Gallardo actually for a minute, because we're obviously into the retro era of design. Obviously there's the Frank Stephenson designed Mini, close to my heart because I had a Cooper, but also the amazing Dodge Magnum, which we got in the UK as the 300C. And that was designed by, well, Ralph Gilles, but also Freeman Thomas, who really kind of kicked off all of that retro stuff with the VW Beetle re-release.
Both the Mini and the Dodge Magnum SRT8 remain very much at the affordable end of the scale for now, but quotes and policy numbers are on the rise. Of this trio though, it had to be the Tangerine Dream that I took out on track.
Well, it is just a little bit lower than the G-Wagon. I also love the fact that I'm driving this because it means we've had 4, 6, 8, now 10 and 12 cylinders. The V10 in this is a 5 litre, so the early Gallardos had this 5 litre V10 which was slightly different to the later 5.2, so it was Lamborghini designed. Yes, Audi made the block and shipped it to Italy, but this had an even firing order as opposed to the uneven firing order of the later engine, so it does sound a bit different. It sounds glorious. There were some differences within these early cars as well, because The very early ones actually had slightly taller ratios, so I think it's worth finding the shorter ratios of the later cars like the Spiders. The very earliest Gallardos had just under 500 brake horsepower. These ones went up, at least nominally, a little bit, but they're all around about 500 brake horsepower and just over 4 seconds to 60 miles an hour. Now obviously we're talking about the Gallardo specifically in its manual form. The gearbox was made by Graziano like the E-Gear, the robotized manual. But this, what a gearbox. It's not just a manual for a manual's sake. I mean, I love being able to have 3 pedals, but even amongst manual gearboxes, this is definitely a good one.
It's smooth and pretty undemanding, but also tactile with the way that ball top lever click-clacks around the gate. It's certainly obvious why these are commanding a 50% premium over the E-Gear examples.
And this is an open-gated manual that was arguably, well, even better than what Ferrari was doing at the time, sort of beating them at their own game, really. And in terms of design as well, this is a Luke Donkervolker design. I think when you look at it compared to its contemporaries from Ferrari, so the 360 really, I know which one I think is aged better. This still looks absolutely stunning. I love those exposed rear lights of this early car in particular, and these wing mirrors, they never get old. An orange Lamborghini amongst the pumpkin colours of Lime Rock in the fall. What a way to finish.
A raging bull to conclude the bull market. And if any of this class of 2025 have got you rushing to the classifieds, just remember, there's no time like the present.